The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, this is Arlene from Durian ASEAN, and you're listening to us at our interview as Secretary General of the Parti Sosialis Malaysia, as well as the co-founder of Blindspot. We're going to discuss on working class. With me is Sivarajan and Azlan Awang. Welcome.
Thank you, Arlene.
Before we start our working class in Malaysia, I want to know what is actually, or who they are, the Malaysian working class.
To me, the working class are the people who depend more on income from wages or from work, right? And you have the other class of people who have substantial income from their capital assets, capital and assets, and things like properties and financial asset, cash in the bank, fixed deposit, things like that. So that they are different. They are a small group. The bulk of the population are actually the working class.
So if I have to repackage what you say is, those who are from the working class are those who do not really have money that are stored.
Not that they don't have money, but they have to rely probably about something like 80% to 90%. Or even 100% of their income paycheck would be coming from their paycheck, yes. Rather than from, they have a property where it's accruing rent, fixed deposit in the bank, they collect 2,000 a month, that kind of things.
And they don't have passive income as well, like business or shares or, those kind of income that you don't really have to work literally on it. It just comes to you?
Well, generally you have actually the according to the DOS statistics, right? There's something like a few 100,000 of employer class, right? Now the employer class, they would also accrue their salaries and wage, right? As well as will also gain from the profits and dividends. So, but the bulk, they rely almost totally on the monthly wages and whatnot.
And they work per hour, and that's how they get.
No, not necessarily. I think even if they are paid monthly, we should not single out the working class as those who are paid daily wage. No,
who are they that
when we say wage, we mean they paid some regular income because of their work. That it could be paid weekly, could be paid daily or hourly, or even monthly.
And what about you? Like, who are the working class in Malaysia? If you were to
professions, you see, as taking from a general perspective, I can say that anyone whose main source of income is through by he offering his labor. That means from his labor, he does not own any assets or capital, and through his labor, where he's earning some income, and that big life. I think that we can classify as becoming the working class. And if you look at Malaysia, we have roughly about 13 million, about the working population. And things have changed a lot. Actually, previously, back in the 70s, the biggest section of this would have been the industrial working class, mainly directly involved in the manufacturing sector. Now, I would say it's only about 30% plus are actually involved directly in the manufacturing working.
Nation now is wider, like people working in part-time or students who are interning.
Yeah, and also you can look at 56% or more would be from the service sector. So that has changed a lot. Previously, there was no really established service sector. Now you'll find there's a big section of service sector. We should not also forget, when we talk about Malaysian working class, there is at least 2.2 million of registered foreign workforce here. This is registered and what is from the government statistics. But there is clearly at least about 3.3 million which are undocumented workers, which the government itself has got no idea on actual numbers. And don't forget, there might be the refugees which are also here. There could be easily amounting to about 150,000 of them. And they are also serving into this whole pool of working class.
And they are contributing towards the Malaysian economy, even though they may not pay taxes and they might not be recognized as a as a working
correct. And
person.
Because they are, in a way, because they are not allowed to work legally, but they are sustaining their life for many years. So in a way that they are serving as a pool of these working people, and that really has got huge implications on the registered working people of Malaysia.
And in today's world, not just in Malaysia, like even the definition of working class has changed so much. You know, you mentioned like in the past when you work in the industrial capitalist system where majority of the working class are concentrated in. Now, even people who work freelance, people who drive an Uber, for example, they could be the working class, or people who just simply they might not fit into that definition of working class that we came to know in the past. So when you want to address the plights of working class in Malaysia, do you also, widen the scope to those who don't really fit into the classic definition of working class?
I think now, because there's, like I said, there's a lot of informal sectors which are involved, but I think in order to address, we have to look at the majority sector, the sectors which really has got the impact on the economy, the main industrial sectors, either it is manufacturing, agricultural, service and so on, and which is the workforce which is serving these sectors. So I think we have to look at that particular. Of course, we do have in the periphery the informal sectors, people are just working from home and they're working part-time and so on. But they would also fit into the working class. But if we want to look at key issues of the working class, we have to look at the established sectors. That's what I feel.
Okay. And in the last two general election, a lot of people complain that there's a divide in the urban population, and of course this directly impact those that they define as working class and those that they define as middle class, which are majority living in the urban area. Do you feel that Malaysia is getting divided further between the rural and the urban, or the way or the economic divide is living in the rural areas and the urban areas?
I think there is a trend, and that trend is not peculiar to it's quite across global economies. For instance, we're seeing the 99% movement versus the 1%, in the United States, and the same phenomena is happening in Europe as well. So this divide, as what one would call it, is a widespread phenomena. In Malaysia, you are probably seeing the beginning of a more stark inequality. In the US, is starker, right? It's even worse. It's more serious. But I think what we should also be discussing maybe later would be the reason why this is happening. So there is definitely a divide. In Malaysia, it's not so. Maybe it's not so. I mean, statistically, we do not see the thing. But earlier, during our pre-interview, the data that suggests there's a terrible trend in the country, a worrying trend, is when we look at the retirement, the old age retirement situation. There's very few that can actually afford to retire. According to data from EPF, there's only about something like 30% of people who can afford to retire with about 1,000 or more per month of budget. In other words, 70% of the working class or the rakyat or working people have less than 1,000 per month.
So they have to continue work until they die of old age.
Yes, they have to work, and the fact is that is the final outcome. I mean, you have slogged on your life, and the country have slogged on for the last 50 years with our Merdeka and whatnot, and this is the result we're seeing. So it's not a very positive thing, and is there a mechanism to alleviate their problems on this one? There are not.
But this one is not like a big secret. Like, the government is well aware of the fact that the working class in Malaysia are feeling a lot of heat, especially with the rising cost of living that we are facing right now.
Yeah, but they're addressing issues which has got political impact. These are issues which even the common people don't quite understand. It comes out in the mainstream papers talking about the issue on the cost of living, right? So people attribute that to inflation, and maybe the GST has some effect, but the real cost is actually what is not mentioned by the government or by even the common people, by the people, is that our wages are very low. The wage is what creates cost of living an issue. The cost of living in the Western countries, for instance, is 2 times, 3 times what we have here, right? But they don't have an issue, right? They don't have, because their wages is about 10 times more than us. So it's the purchasing power of the income that we get. So similarly, I think the rest of the problems like HO retirement, cost of living, affordability of owning a house, these are problems which sometimes are addressed on a very political angle just to satisfy people's concern.
Talking about politics, you are a politician, or at least I see you as a politician. Do you think politicians in Malaysia, they are out of touch with the working class in Malaysia?
I cannot say that overall everyone is out of touch, but because it's that everyone sort of follows and sort of adheres to the economic system that we have here. We are sort of taught to have an economic system that whereby in order to be competitive, you must have a low wage policy. You need to have an economy which is commodity based. You need to have an economy which is export led, and we need to bring in FDI and so on. So this is a certain level of policy and mindset that we are sort of following, and everyone sort of follows to this. So with that, people accept, say that yes, we're Malaysian workers, you need to pay low because you want to compete with Vietnam, and that's the only way that we can sort of be a developed nation and so on.
So you're suggesting a change of paradigm when it comes
Yes.
to trying to understand or trying to push the Malaysian economy forward.
Yes, we need an alternative perspective to development, and it does not really mean that we are going to move backwards. It means that we need to sort of, because how this whole system works is that the crisis that we are facing now is that as the global capitalism sort of pushes down on workers' wages, they are basically creating or lowering the aggregate demand that's needed to sort of revive the market itself. So people, if they have no money in their pockets, how are they going to spend? If they are unable to spend, then no one is going to buy the goods which the capitalists produce. And this is a constant cycle of problems that we always have. As for the capitalists, they want to increase their profit margins, so they push down on the wages. But they do not realize that as you push down the wages, you're basically sort of depleting your market, because the people who are supposed to buy your goods, they don't have money. And this is a very obvious thing that we can see every time the economic crisis happens.
So the vicious cycle continues, and we will continue our discussion later on in the second segment of Durian ASEAN.
The Durian Heat, bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hi, you are back with me, Arlene, and with two of our speakers here, Sivarajan, Secretary General at Parti Sosialis Malaysia, as well as Azlan Awang, co-founder of Blindspot. Today we are going to continue our discussion on the plights of the Malaysian working class. Early on in the on defining what actually is a working class, and also in terms of the working class right now. But when it comes to talking about issues, the biggest concern among Malaysians right now, regardless of the class, but especially among the working class, would be the rising cost of living. And how has this impacted the working class, if I may ask?
God knows. But we know that everybody is complaining, and depending on how the data that the government is providing, or various newspaper clippings on this issue. But we know that one thing, the cost of living, if you look at us, right, you have the household expenditure survey 2014, that's the latest, right? If you look at the food budget for most families below, let's say 6,000, right, their budget is very small. You're talking about something like 7 ringgit, 8 ringgit per head per day. I mean, is that enough? So for those income below 3,000, below 2,000, how much can they afford to? And these are their government numbers. You can actually they differentiate the food portions and the rest. So the budget is $3, 3 ringgit, 4 ringgit per person per day. Obviously, if you cook at home, things like that, then it's probably much cheaper lah. But then it's not much. 3 ringgit, 4 ringgit.
Especially, I think those living in the urban area, they don't really have lands. They cannot go to the forest and catch whatever that they need to catch, or they don't even have a river that they can fish for fish. it's really hard on those living in an urban area more so than rural areas.
Yes. Nak balik kampung pun dah tak boleh dah, you know. So it's a very serious matter. But like I said, it's because
of the
the
wages.
like Siva mentioned just now, the policy sort of encourages the suppression of wages. You know, a lot of other things lah, which eventually leads to very low wage nation. You know, it's a very low wage nation.
And I think one of the cause of the high cost of living is partly due to the GST, and the government said it's necessary since our main commodity, which is the oil and gas field, is not doing that well. Do you think having GST is something? It was a good move by the government?
It again comes back to the paradigm and the mindset of the economic policies that the powers, those in powers that they hold. Basically, we just moved from a tax which is supposed to be on what you earn to a consumer-based tax, and that is a very regressive move, because I think very clearly since last year, 1st of April last year, immediately all your consumer goods, the necessary goods, everyday goods went up about 30%. To make things worse, I think end of last year, even the public transports, KTM, LRT, all of those went up again. Then we have the weakening of the ringgit, which made things worse, and with the low oil prices and so on. So we find that what the government has done is that consciously they have sort of reduced the corporate tax since the 1980s, and now I think somewhere around 25% or so, and they want to go further down to match Singapore and so on, and they are sort of embarked on this consumer tax. So we started off with 6% now, and this is really a problem that we have, whereby that, like I said again, once you start taxing on consumer goods, when people do not have alternatives, and that is a problem. But if you tax on profits that are being made, or on any kind of capital gains, or people who do on the share market, when there's any kind of extra profits, windfall profits that you get, if you tax on that is okay, because there is something which is
but the government's
extra.
argument on this, why they don't do the capital gains tax and other form of tax that are based on the passive income, is because it's not constant. Like unlike the tax via GST, you know that you will get a huge sum of money at the end of the day, or at the I mean, do you think that justifies the government's action?
I think because if you look at it that way, because if either the super rich or you tax more on the corporations, in terms of value that's much larger. So if you really have a very a good policy, a good enforcement can get through that, it's a very huge section. Another thing is that the problem that we have now with all these new trade agreements which are coming in, and all of them are calling for removal of tariffs. For a developing country like Malaysia, I think we are not ready to sort of remove all our tariffs, and also to protect certain sectors in our economy, removal or import tariffs, export taxes and so on. So as the government sort of, in order to follow to the global economy, they want to do these things. So they're basically losing money, and they have to replace it with something else. So we find that they go on this kind of regressive taxes. So I think that is a problem. But what we should look at is basically to sort of how do you have an effective system to tax the super rich? How do you tax the industries which has a monopoly on the economy? And naturally they will be making huge profits. So I think that is the key thing that we should look at, how to enforce those sectors.
Okay. And what about you? What do you think about the current situation right now?
The
model
I think
that
the
we have.
GST, even though it plays a role in the problem at the present cost of living rising, but that is not the main thing actually. The main thing is actually profiteering, and the government has not much legal mechanism to address this. So far, I've not heard of any companies, businesses, industries being charged with profiteering. There is an Anti-Profiteering Act. There is the mechanism to calculate profiteering, right? But I have not seen any is being made. So it is true actually that GST is replacing the sales tax and blah blah blah, right? And theoretically it shouldn't go up, but it does go up. Now because inflation, rising cost of living, right? It actually should be the rising cost of raw materials, right? Like energy and but labor is cheap, right? Minyak makin turun, right? GST pun actually is not so much impact actually, but it's the profiteering, and in other words, favors businesses. They can do whatever they like. There's no effective mechanism to control them, to check them. So that is the problem. I think we have to relook at this. And now they're even talking about revisiting the Anti-Profiteering Act, and with the possibility of removing it entirely, right? I mean, there's some mention about it in the media. I don't know how true this is. So that's how the situation is. The other thing is profiteering is not so much also on the consumer goods. I mean, the profiteering, if you look at the corporate profit tax, right? The corporate profits, the PAT, profit after tax, if you aggregate it over GDP, right? In Malaysia, in the US, which is a more capitalist economy, right? It's below 10. It's 8%, 9%. Right, and they have quite a rigorous tax system. They have capital gains tax, right? So there's a lot of things to do. You can address the problems of the rakyat, in terms of cost of living, transfer, right? We don't have the transfer thing. We have a small transfer called BRAME. It should be more substantial than that. If we use the GST collection of something like 30 billion a year, right? Probably higher than that. I think soon it will be announced. I think for last year. I think let's say we collect about 30 billion, right? Now that 30 billion, because the government have declared that it will only be used for the rakyat, not for projects and whatnot. They should not make it like that, projects. Rakyat should be more like more direct cash transfer.
Providing direct cash transfer.
Yes, I think this is how you distribute things.
I see.
But there's the mechanism to like the BRIM punya arrangement. It's got to be through a proper income tax system.
I mean, having welfare centric kind of policy is good for the short run, and especially if you need some kind of immediate assistance to relieve the kind of issues that you have. Long term, in terms of structural issues, right? I think at the end of this, because when wages are suppressed, no matter how much BRIM that you receive per month, or even from Baitumal and all that, is still not enough for the family for money from different sources of welfare, either through government welfare implementation. I think with the government's vision of a high income nation in 2020, which is after this, do you think the government is focused enough in terms of trying to missions towards a high income nation?
I think the government is caught with a lot of contradictions. Basically, it's still, like I said, it's got the same mindset about cheap labour policy. Actually, if you look at it, if you look within the region itself, we, with the current minimum wage about 1,000, which we think is something we should welcome. It's a very good move, but we are actually on par with Philippines and Indonesia. What we cannot fight with is Vietnam, because Vietnam is way low down there. So I think as a region, there's something that needs to be done. If not, we are always caught up in this. And if you really talk about ASEAN working together, making common policies and so on, this is something they should promote. Why don't ASEAN itself come to a common understanding whereby all of them will have minimum wages, sure that the workers' mobility working from other countries within ASEAN itself. We know that if workers are moving from one ASEAN country to another, their welfare is being taken off, and they based on certain minimum standards. The second thing we can also look at is that if you want to sort of stop capital flight, then ASEAN itself can be a platform where they can agree on, say that, okay, why don't we have a certain level of corporate tax, or capital tax or something, so that we know that anywhere in ASEAN, basically the tax system is, because this is a developing country playing field, you see. So there should be some kind of understanding within ASEAN, so it sort of promotes common growth. It's not a race to the bottom that all of the ASEAN countries just fighting each other to go, to be more competitive. If we don't do this, then what's the meaning of ASEAN itself? So I think that's something that the people should look at.
We will continue our discussion on the third segment, where we discuss on how to address the problem, especially when it comes to wages.
The Durian Heat. bringing big ideas and critical opinions in Southeast Asia.
Hey, you're back with me, Arlene, again at Durian ASEAN, and today segment of the discussion on the plights of the Malaysian working class. So with me is Sivarajan and Azlan Awang. Sivarajan is the Secretary General at Parti Sosialis Malaysia or PSM, and Azlan Awang is the co-founder of Blindspot. So continuing our discussion when we discuss intensively on the high income nation in the next 4 years, which is 2020. And of course, personally to me, wages is one of the key issue that I think Malaysians are not seeing a rise since the last 2 decades, that we haven't seen like a rise in the Malaysian wages. It has always been
the real wage
The-
in terms affected with inflation.
Do you think the Malaysian government is on the right track to address whatever issues that we have right now among the working class in order for us to achieve the high income nation?
Far from it. I think like Shiva mentions now, the paradigm, we need to have a paradigm shift, and but the pursuit for achieving the high income nation status, right, that itself also is a very flawed thinking. Singapore got achieved their high income nation based on the World Bank threshold, right? Earlier, Singapore achieved it much earlier, 90s. They refused to accept that recognition, because once you become a high income nation, then you lose a lot of privileges as well, especially in terms of trade and whatnot. Malaysia ni nak sangat the high income status for what? Now, anyway, if anybody is a bit anxious to know what is actually, how will Malaysia look like being high income, right?
Besides a higher GDP?
I mean, what is high income nation? What is Malaysia like? If you're too anxious, over anxious, then just go to Sarawak, because Sarawak has since 2014 has been a high income economy. The high GDP per capita, and so is Kuala Lumpur, and so is Labuan, and Pulau Pinang. 2014 they achieved the high income status, right? But the rest of the country hasn't. So the rest of the state is what's dragging our knee. And not only that, effectively we have been a high income economy much earlier. Actually, the problem was the ringgit crash
In the 90s,
in the 19th Asian financial crisis. Then we suffered a lot. We are suffering again another round of the ringgit. The threshold is measured in dollars, right? So first thing is it does not carry much meaning, this high income nation. So you might as well call it based on this GDP per capita. You might how many Ferraris per capita is Malaysia? Does it bring any meaning to the working class? Doesn't.
It could be one person owning the whole
Yeah,
Ferrari
I mean,
in the world.
in Shah Alam, within a few hours, I can see 2 or 3 Ferraris and Lamborghini and so on moving around in the street. Does it reflect the whole of Shah Alam? It doesn't. So the fetish on the GDP is wrong.
So if you don't like the word high income nation, since it reflects only on the GDP, what would be a better choice of words and also meaning?
Okay, firstly, let's address what the government have laid down on the table, right? The RMK 11 has got a broader measure of our economic success than the GDP. I think they specifically mentioned that now we're using a different metrics. We have this family happiness index and things like that. But that's not enough. I think the what Joseph Stiglitz defined, for instance, what is a successful economy is an economy that delivers gains and benefit to majority of its people, right? And the majority of its people does not suffer from continuing or increasing insecurity, regardless whether the GDP has rise. It is a failed economy. It's a failed economy. So I think that it's a simple definition. Now, if we are facing with cost of living issues, we are facing with household debt, we're facing with students here, right from graduation, they carry some 100,000 ringgit or 50,000 ringgit PTN hutang, all kinds of problems. You cannot afford to buy a house, right? And it's across the board, problems all over. I mean, in other words, continuing and increasing insecurity, right? We do not know what's the future like. Parents are worried about their children, right? Are there jobs? There really jobs? I think we have moved too quickly just now on the issues on the labour market, on working class and so on. There's a lot of problems with I have a lot of problems with the data that's available. For instance, Siva mentioned just now that there's only 2.3 million registered foreign workers. In actual fact, there are more, probably 3, probably 4 unregistered. At one point, the minister mentioned about 7 million, right? So these are the issues that we have to really look at. The data's got to be impeccable. It's got to be so. I think we currently have the GDP and some this happy index and whatnot. It's not enough. We have to tackle straight to the household income and wages kind of metrics, you know.
And with that, how to tackle it?
Okay, just to touch a bit on the high income nation. I think like high income nation has got no meaning if we still have very high Gini coefficient, where the disparity between the rich and the poor, and that is not a Malaysian problem. If you look at some of the reports when you talk about the Millennium Development Goals, countries which have achieved the MDGs, but they are unable to do anything about the disparity between the rich and the poor. So I think that is what the government should focus on. And the other thing we should also look at is that when you say that, okay, people will have a better living conditions and so on, but are we living on our own wealth or are we living on borrowed money? If you look at in 2010, our household debt over GDP is about 140%. That means all of us have housing, have cars and everything, but it's all on borrowed money. So that is not an actual indication on wealth itself. And if you look at the young people of today, they have loads of loans that they have to carry, and that is a very bad indication on the social the economic status of our country. So I think it is what we should firstly do is that we should really look at the foreign labor market, because that is really giving a big implication on our workers. As long as we keep bringing in foreign labor, they will keep pushing down the wages, and it's going to be bad for all the working class.
But do you think it's the problem of the foreign labor, or is the problem of us not being, I guess the word, stern enough towards the wages in the country?
I think it is a bit of both. See, because
I mean, for companies, you always want to employ the best. Obviously, for example, in Europe, you have the EU First policy where you have to advertise to European member countries first before you open the employment to outsiders. But in this case, in Malaysia, like, do you really think that is the problem of the foreign labor employment, or do you think that our government and also maybe policymakers are not serious enough at increasing the wages in the country?
I think it is, if during some of the discussion with some of the immigration people and even with the Human Resource Ministry, we find that this whole procedure, even though they have certain procedures in place, but we find it's a whole sham. We find that there is a requirement by the employers to really advertise and to get local labor. If they fail to do so, then they can apply for coordinating these things. And it's very obvious. You can go to some smaller towns, even like in Perlis, for example, and you'll find a facility there. But none of the youth, the locals in Perlis, they're actually working there. They are also going off to KL to work. And very interestingly, when I was there, you can see that the workers who are actually working in these factories, they are at least about 70% foreign workers. Why are the locals from either in the urban or even the rural, our own Malaysians, they're not able to get jobs in these factories?
I can answer that for you. It goes back to the wages.
Yeah, it's
for any young people, or I mean, in general Malaysians, unless you're infatuated with the place that you're staying, it all boils down to wages.
I was worried when you say we go for the foreign workers because of talent. We certainly don't.
We don't.
More high value and professionals, maybe we do that. But the rest, the bulk of the 6 million, 7 million numbers that we have on foreign workers is basically the wage. It's basically to basically, if you look at the crux of it, it's basically to increase profit. This export-led growth strategy that Siva was mentioning just now.
For
how to maximize your profit.
Yeah, for employers, they might argue that it's going to increase our costs and so on. But actually, if you look at the percentage of wage over GDP, I think we are doing only 30% or so.
34%.
So that means we are a productive nation. So our workers are productive. There is an increase in actual value. but the portion of the wages is far lower. So it is a problem when the employers sort
and
of
why?
cry.
Why this is a problem? I mean, you being part of the PSM, Parti Sosialis Malaysia, like what kind of discussion that is happening on the government level or on the policymaker level when it comes to wages?
I think in terms of wages, they're being very careful. They're trying to, like I said, as long as the mindset is to please foreign direct investment and to so fall by their own lobby to say that
Do
they have
we
to
have
keep
like
you.
a strong employers lobbying group,
Yes, of course.
group here?
Yeah, I think that is still very strong.
Very, very strong.
Yeah, very
the minimum
strong.
wage is basically determined by the Federation of Employers. You know, it's the government just compromising, and they agreed to the MTUC wanted 1,002, and you get off 40% wage over GDP. We have to raise the minimum wage to about 1,008. The average, it's got to raise it about 1,008, 1,007, 1,008. Now that's a long way to go. We've got only 4 years, right? And why are we just raising it by 100 ringgit? So, who actually determines things? I mean, what's the problem here? I think the problem is against the paradigm, right? The paradigm that Siva mentioned. The worry is that they're going to lose. Now, actually, the reason there is a minimum wage policy by the federal government is because to make sure that everybody have got to raise their salary. If the big companies have to raise salaries, the small companies don't have to, then there's a bit of unfairness there. If local don't have to raise, the foreign have to raise, that is again. But if everybody got to raise, then there will be that's fairness, and as well as there'll have to be a change in the business model. You're gonna have like a restaurant having 20 people serving you at one time. You probably got to have a bit more self-service. You're going to have 4 or 5 people at the petrol station. It's got to be self-service. We have been doing self-service for many years. Suddenly you see foreigners now at the petrol station now. I mean, again, sort of winning us into relying more on foreign workers. So these are the issues. Okay, what would be the effect of raising wages? The economy does not lose. Sorry, the big industries does not lose because
but why they are defending this? Why they are defending the
short-term profit consideration? Short-term profit consideration. They not really want to grow the economy. If you want to grow the economy, you want to grow the market, and what else better than having a market that's got.
Last question here before we end the show. What is PSM's strategy in this, and also maybe to you as well, because it seems like the solution is a political solution rather than just an economic solution. Like how, I mean, if the solution is about increasing the lobbying power for the working class, so what would PSM do on this?
I think one thing is that as the government policy itself, it must make sure that it has implemented this new minimum wage, and it has to review. It makes sure he has to review every 2 years so that it's kept up with your consumer price index. The second thing is that we have to really put a plug on this foreign labor. It's not to say that we are anything against people from this region, but it's that it really affects our economy, and we should really make sure that there must be a clear match between the supply and the demand of the labor that we have here locally. The third thing we should look at is, instead of besides the wages itself, direct wages, we should also look at the social wages. How are we going to subsidize the housing for the poor? Those are social wages where you don't directly pay the workers, but people are ensured of their safety in terms of housing, in terms of health. How are you going to control the health costs? How are you going to control the education costs? And the social wages also, you can look at transport costs, because working class are the one who use the public transport. So how do you cap the increases on this price increase in these sectors, whereby it sort of benefits them, so people are ensured of at least a minimum standard of living. So I think these are the few things that we have to lead. And again, coming back to the first question, is that where is this economy going? Is it more on a commodity-based, export-led kind of economy, or are we going to focus on an economy which is more fulfilling our domestic requirements? Can we reduce our food import bill? Why are we still importing? Why do we focus more on agriculture, where that also you can generate a lot of work, jobs, and so on? So there's a lot of policy changes that we need to make.
And your final feedback on
Yeah,
this?
I think we have to review our national goals. It should not be GDP and FDI and whatnot. There's got to be a major shift in our thinking. And the government we at Blindspot, we only do we present facts and our opinion, and we do propose some policy changes and things here and there. But I think the government have got to try to engage with the various NGOs and people on the street, to hear out, are we doing the right thing? I mean, it should not be imposing things which are shown to be not delivering the results for the people wanted for so long. So there's got to be a review on this. There's a lot of things that needs to be done.
So anyway, thank you very much, Sivarajan and also Azlan Awang, for sharing your opinions regarding on the plights of the Malaysian working class. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for tuning into Durian ASEAN. For more interviews by Durian ASEAN, please tune into our website at durianasean.com. If you're on the go, you can always download our TuneIn app on your mobile. Please subscribe to our YouTube channels at Durian ASEAN and Durian ASEAN TV. Don't forget to follow us on our Facebook page, Twitter, and Instagram. We always welcome feedbacks from our listeners. Stay tuned with the Durian Heat from Tuesday to Thursday, the same time at 1 to 2 p.m. GMT+8.
You're now listening to Durian ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing.